welcome back. Today is Chapter 7 of Fragments of Divinity. This is your host and the author, Bere, Vinu. These are called the last chapters because for years I had misplaced them, and it was almost so depressing I almost quit writing altogether. And that happens to a lot of people, so back up your work. All right, anyways. Knave spent the entire break away. Oh my goodness. Before I continue, I almost didn't hit record in my audio software because after this I go through and I update different character voices, or if I screw up, I'll do post editing. And so I'm trying to kill as many birds with one stone as possible so I don't have to record and record and record. Although I'll probably go ahead and record these chapters several more times after the fact, which to me is crazy, but that's the business. Okay, so boom. Especially if you're doing self-editing. I would love to work with more people in the future, but for now, I just got to do what I can. Renaming this to Chapter 7. Let's change the color. Whatever. One moment. 7. I'll just call it 7. Okay, I'm going to trigger that. And let's try one more time from the top. There we go. Actually, let me make sure it's not recording. And it is. It's doing exactly what I was afraid it was. It's recording over my last chapter. Oh, what fun. What fun this is to experiment with audio in the morning. Okay. One more time. 3, 2, 1. Okay. So this, once again, is Chapter 7, The Lost Chapters, with me, Bere Vinu, of Fragments of Divinity. Knave spent the entire break away from the castle. After the second day sleeping in the guest room at Raja's manor, the family asked him if he would like to go on a hunt with them. Knave wasn't at all interested in the hunt itself, but he gladly agreed to accompany Raz and Raja. He was surprised when Arshnot actually agreed to let him go, considering he may have had questions about the dependencies, but he assured him that they would have time for that later. They made their way northwest, where they made camp near a gushing river. Raja showed them tracking methods, how to make traps on game trails, as well as various ways to start a fire. At this point, Knave and Raz were well familiar with most of it, but they allowed Raja to play the role of father rather than Lord of War for a bit. As the days passed, they spent a great deal of time practicing archery by attempting to hit pine cones off a tree across the river while monitoring fishing poles for a bite. For the first time in his life, Knave felt relaxed. On the last night, they sat around the fire roasting fish, and Raja recounted a great story from when they lived on the Elajan coast. There we were, shipwrecked on a small isle, after I swear was the storm of the century. This was just a temporary problem, because I had tumult though, Raja said, slapping the blue claymore on his back. Before the men could even speak of hunger, we sped off into the ocean, and I landed the biggest tuna I've ever seen. It may well have been a baby leviathan. How'd you do that? Asked Knave. Well, replied Raja, you see, Knave, Tumult happens to be the spirit of a great Lenni warrior, so he can speed through the water while I hold him to his hilt. Whoa, I didn't know that, said Knave. How did you get him? Well, started Raja. That's actually kind of a long story, Knave, Raja interjected. Besides, isn't there something that we've been meaning to ask him out here? Oh, right, said Knave, folding his arms and leaning towards the fire. What is it, Knave? Asked Raja. You see, Knave started hesitantly, glancing at Raz, who encouraged him with a nod. I have no memory of the night when we returned to Tannendale on the first mission. What, did the men get you drunk? Raz, how could you have allowed such a thing? No, father, listen, pleaded Raz. He told me that he was going to look into something on his own. I wanted to accompany him, but he refused. I didn't really have strength to do so anyways, but he doesn't remember telling him. Raja pondered, resting his beard on his palm. Knave, did you question the men about what they remembered? Maybe they saw something. No, they were all exhausted after expending too much energy using the dependency. Also, Raz told me I should bring this to your attention. I'm not entirely sure that's the best course of action here, Raja said, looking sternly at his son. Is there anything else that stands out as significant about this memory loss? Nave rubbed the neck of his neck subconsciously. Not really. Oh, wait a minute. I remember a pain in the back of my neck the next morning, like I'd been pricked there by something. Raja and Raz locked eyes at this revelation. Raz nodded to his father, who remained perfectly still. Why should that matter, though? Nave asked. Because the same thing has happened to us before, said Raz. On multiple occasions, admitted Raja. Nave was stunned. He wasn't sure what it meant, and by the looks of it, neither did they. When did this start happening? Pressed Nave. Raja sighed deeply. Our earliest recollection was the morning the King Arshnad announced your adoption. That morning felt off in many ways. How so? Well, for one thing, started Raz. That's enough, snapped Raja. Look, I'm glad you boys brought this to my attention, but the conversation ends here. But father, no, Raz, I'm sorry, but this is for his own good. Knave, we've both been tormented by memory loss for years now, and the conclusions I've drawn aren't to be taken lightly. I ask that you, for now, both keep this to yourselves. I assure you, to speak of this openly would put us all in great danger. Knave's eyes reflected the dancing flames as he was on the brink of tears. Now, you boys get some sleep. We'll head back in the morning. After a particularly restless night of sleep, and still no talk in the dream space, Knave found himself constantly looking over his shoulder towards their campsite, wishing he'd just make a home there in the wilderness. But the break was all over too soon before he knew it, and he found himself standing before the king once more, awaiting orders. But Knave was put on a happy mask, and he presented himself. How was your break, sonny? The king asked joviously. It was great, Knave replied genuinely. You should come next time. Would that I could, the king sighed as he sat back heavily on the throne. And I would like that very much, very much. But I'd like to inform you that while you are away, we've come up with a new mission that is far safer than your previous expeditions. What's the mission? Asked Knave. There's a highly regarded library in the kingdom to the east that may hold knowledge of how to develop a dependency utilizing long-forgotten Ovean methodology. Sir, did anyone know of this before? Well, the difficult answer is yes, and for that I'm sorry. It was an oversight on our part, I assure you. While the library is truly great, there is a portion of it that's sealed behind an ancient element known as Olodin. Why the ancient Assyrians allowed this portion of the library to be sealed by the Ovean is a mystery. Then again, it's not as if they would have truly had a say in the matter. But if there's an acknowledgement of how to properly kindle a dependency in the Hathos, it will be there. But how am I supposed to get past the Olodin? Was it? I don't know anything about the Ovean. Knave, how can you still doubt yourself? You were able to fully manifest 2 dependencies on your own in a matter of days. Surely some of the bookwork won't be a problem. Besides, you won't be alone. I'll be sending with you the greatest minds Aja has to offer. Sounds interesting, said Knave, sounding reassured. Who will make up the team? Well, there are your 4 teachers, of course. Not them, said Knave. Then he quickly covered his mouth, surprising even himself. The king laughed heartily. You're still in a vacation mindset, I see. But yes, I'm sorry to say that your favorite people in the world will be accompanying you along with your Medician, Duncan, and 2 brilliant military strategists, General Arnaud and Captain Vestibon. Not only that, but I have allowed them to bring their families. That being said, you can have Raz accompany you once more if you'd like. But sir, Raz already has a dependency. Will he be able to add another? I'm entirely unsure of what will happen at this instance, but I know successful missions are often a result of good team dynamic. Raz certainly seems to push you, and he'll help to bridge a age gap between you and the team. Balance is always a good thing, not that it's ever been an issue for you. Then I accept, said Knave. Good. Then you'll bot first thing in the morning. Prepare, however, you see fit. Yes, sir, said Knave, saluting and turning on his heel to leave. Knave made his way across the grounds and back to Raz's manor. Raza greeted him at the door as he knocked. Knave, what brings you back here so soon? New mission, sir, said Knave. King Arshnad is sending a group of us to study at the library of Asenia. And we're to accompany you? Well, the king said bringing Raz would be a good way to bridge the age gap between me and even older team this time, sir. I see, said Raja. Well, if that's the only reason, I think I'll keep Raz here to help run drills with the rest of our army. You understand, right? Sure, said Knave, acting as if he wasn't shocked. Well, just let him know I'll be gone for a while again, please, said Knave before saluting and returning to the castle with a little less pep in his step. As Raja closed the door behind, he heard Raz walk up behind him. "You realize King's orders supersede your own, right?" "Listen here, Raz," replied Raja sternly. "His life isn't the only one in danger if you two continue to pry into things that I've warned you not to. We're dealing with ancient powers, and you could be jeopardizing our post here in Arja, not to mention, the immediate danger to our family." "The only ancient power I've seen come directly from Nave, Father. He's getting stronger, and he needs our direction, otherwise he won't be able to use ones when we're in danger." Raza didn't reply, mostly because he agreed. "He's like something out of a myth. Besides, I feel like we've adopted him at this point." "And you're not just saying this because of your new dependency? You realize that by going, your unit won't be able to practice with it either." "I know. Look, I'll go by and explain it to all of them. Whatever is going on here, Nave needs our support." Raja sighed. "Well, you're doing exactly as I asked from the start. Fine, keep an eye on him and continue to teach him our ways." "I will, Father," said Raj, saluting before racing out the door. Raja turned to watch him go, but Raz's haste dependency didn't even leave a blur. Nave was surprised when he found Raz pepping his mount in the stable the next morning. "What are you doing here?" asked Nave. "Why, preparing to depart, of course." "But I thought your father didn't want you to come," said Nave, leading his own white steed out of the stable. "Well, I helped him to see reason. Besides, the king said I should come, so that's enough authority for me." "I hope that doesn't cause any issues between you two. It really should just be a simple mission." "Quit worrying about it, Nave. Father knows that it is the right thing to do. He's just trying to protect all of us in a sort of non-confrontational way. We really will have to figure out a source of the memory loss eventually, don't you think? Besides, it's easy to come to the same conclusion as you both have." "Yes," said Raz. "Besides, let's respect my father's wishes and not speak of it any further. At least not for now." Nave nodded as they mounted their horses to meet the rest of the group at the front gates. The group Arshnad had assembled sat atop horses waiting for their close arrival. First, there was Duncan Porter, the military cleric, had close-cut black hair and mid-height stonecutter's build. He'd been nicknamed the Bone Father for having set so many bones in his time as Medician. Before that, he worked with his father as an artisan. Many attribute this to be the reason for his steady hand on the operating table. Beside him was Arnaud Bellam. General Arnaud was King Arshnad's most trusted advisor, as well as seasoned military veteran. While seated, the height difference wasn't as apparent, but Arnaud towered over them all. That, paired with a proud hawk nose, some said he had Fowler blood somewhere in his lineage. Nave wouldn't know, having only seen drawings of the giant winged Hathos-like creatures referenced in books, but he supposed he would agree. Then there was Captain Vesteban Jax, who Nave thought to be an odd fit for the mission at first. He was their most decorated soldier, and had battle scars to prove it. One particularly ran from his right eye across the length of his scalp, giving him a permanent part of his hair. Together with the dual black blades across his back, he was an intimidating sight to behold. But he knew they were grooming him for higher ranks, and time spent researching the fabled library of Assinia would aid well in strategic planning off the battlefield. Both Arnaud and Vesteban had their multi-corded braids proudly on display over the right shoulders, signifying rank. Lower-ranked soldiers' cords were always on display as small knots over or near the left cheek. Nave's own red braid was tied at the base of his neck, a sign of nobility. He never bothered displaying it over his shoulder, as he felt already stood out like a raging behemoth. Then there was his 4 condescending teachers, of course. He'd rather not spend any additional time with them if possible, but in this instant he couldn't avoid it. He was pretty sure they were racist against Ovean like most all the Hathos, but the King Arshnad had repeatedly assured him that was not the case. Then there was a considerable chain of carriages hosting the group's families. Nave could hear the raucous laughter of children. The sound he would have once longed to be a part of was nothing but grating to him now. As they joined the group, Nave was addressing Vesteban. "Would you like to lead the way?" he asked. "Only if ordered, sir. As King's champion, authority falls to you." "Then please do so," ordered Nave. "All right, men, let's head out," Vesteban commanded, motioning them forward. Nave glared over as to his teachers, who were in fact female, and laughed, seeing one of them raise a hand to her chest in offense. The trip went by relatively fast as they followed the path that bordered the river leading Assinia. One of Nave's teachers complained of developing saddle sore at the pace Vesteban was setting, but other than that there was little interruption. As they came to a clearing, they could see the towering heights of Mount Pius high above the city. Assinia was nestled at the base of a great mountain, with ancient glaciers at its peak that fed the Assinian River running through the majestic city. The white plaster exterior of the building shone brightly as they arrived before sunset. It was a stark contrast to the rest of the surrounding log homes and farms they had encountered along the way. However, there was one building that stood out above all others, even the castle that lay to the north. A huge building that seemed to be made entirely of dozens of towers stole the show. Nave marveled at its architecture and wondered at its purpose. Of course, it had to be the library, and for the first time in his life, Nave was excited to go to one. For long hours growing up, he practically lived in the library with his teachers against his will. But here, in the depths of the library of Abyssinia, were the secrets of his people. Upon seeing the city, the teacher's saddled sore spoke up. "Finally, get me to an inn at once." "Hear, hear," said the other teachers, echoing her sentiment. The party at large merely ignored them as they rode onward. They passed a group of men in brown robes walking together. They were chanting and swaying in unison as a man at the head of the group held his staff aloft, pointed towards the mountaintop. "What's with them?" Nave asked as they passed by. "Don't mind them," said Raz. "Those are just local church members of Ascension. They worship the mountain and make a ritualistic pilgrimage to the top." "They worship the mountain?" Nave repeated in confusion. "Sounds silly enough, I suppose. Some say that the higher the one travels the mountain, the closer they are to Taos. But the mountain provides a constant source of water, which in turn grows the crops and feeds their flocks. Not an altogether bad thing to worship, in my opinion." "I suppose when you see it that way, you're right," admitted Nave, looking up at the grand mountain. "But be warned, Nave. There's also the cult of the mountain." "Cult of the mountain? What's that?" "Years ago, the church split into two groups. One group continued peacefully worship the mountain as they always had, and the other—" "Out with it, Raz," Nav said, rolling his eyes. "The other demands an offering of flesh," he said maniacally. "How can such a group operate without being routed by the local militia? Because they only sacrifice wild game, which they probably just wind up eating themselves." "So you were just trying to scare me?" asked Nave. "Was I?" replied Raz with a sly grin. They passed throughout the city gate and into the sprawling stone road leading throughout the city proper. They passed over multiple bridges that redirected water flow from the main river to feed a network of water systems throughout the city. Nave felt this was the most well-planned city he had ever seen before Vestaban stopped in front of a majestic-looking inn. "Here you are, my lords," said Vestaban. "We'll go announce our arrival to the king. You lot can rest up here." "Finally," said the nagging female teacher, dismounting and leading their horses behind an inn, followed by one of the carriages with their families. Vestaban led the rest of the party towards the castle. The entryway was a triumph of banners that swayed gently in the breeze over an arched drawbridge. Nave observed that everything about Abyssinia had a distinctly Ovaean influence after his experience at the forest shrine. As they passed through the portcullis, the castle opened up into large landscaped grass fields that spread out before the main castle. If you stand at a 45-degree angle and walk 10 spears back from it, the towers align perfectly with the mountain peaks beyond," said Raz, pointing to an ornately designed piece of circular marble off to the side. "That's what this spot is for." "Really?" said Nave. "How do you know that?" "I've been on many expeditions with Father, and I know at this point, so I've been here a handful of times before." Dave handed Raz the reins of the horse and dismounted to stand on the spot, waving for the others to go on as they came to a stop. It was just as he said, although Nave had to take a step back because he was just a bit too short to align from the central mark without going on his tiptoes. He surmised that even this was the work or influence of an Ovaean, as the symmetry of nature and architecture seemed to be a recurring theme among his ancestors. Part of him knew well they all couldn't have been as evil as he'd been told time and time again, but he always kept his to himself. Nave looked over and saw the party was already being greeted at the front gate, so he rushed over to join them. This must be the young Ovaean we've heard so much about," said the attendant. "That would be me, yes," said Nave, bowing. "Well, the king is very much interested in speaking with you. Please, if you'd be allowed to follow me this way," he said, turning and walking through the gates. They passed through the last wall and came to the final circular grass area before the front doors. Here they were greeted by various assistants who took their horses, carriages, and belongings. Vestaban looked reluctant to hand over his sword, but did so anyways. Wives and children were assisted to their rooms, while Nave and the remaining group were led through the elaborate series of hallways, chambers, and stairwells until they finally reached the throne room. The doors barring their way were made of ornately patterned stained glass depicting the creation of the castle. Nave was right that the Ovaean had helped build it. However, there were also all manner of races from Falor to Kati assisting in construction. The attendant knocked twice, and a pair of guards opened the doors. Seated at the far end of the room was a throne of oversized cushions, and seated there was King Rancor of Abyssinia and his breathtakingly beautiful wife, Queen Baba. A giant half-wreath of turkey Aussie cast in gold, copper, and silver hung on the rear wall behind the high window, creating dazzling display. The Rajya assigned to Abyssinia was standing 2 steps in front of them, protectively holding a long sword point down with both hands resting on its pommel. The attendant led them halfway into the room, where 5 large cushions were arranged on the floor for them. The group bowed before sitting cross-legged as well. Raz gave a traditional Liajan salute before sitting by raising his fist from his stomach in a semicircle and pounding his chest twice. The Abyssinian Raja returned it in kind. "Young knave," started Rancor, "you honor us with your presence. King Arshnad said that you are to attempt to open the sealed portion of our great library." "Yes, my lord," replied Knave. "And do you have any idea what is sealed beyond Aladdin in that library?" "No, my lord," Knave admitted. "But the king has reason to believe there is knowledge to be gained within that will be of great aid to our kingdom." "Ah, so I'm to allow a foreign kingdom to attempt to open an ancient chamber for their own betterment at the expense of my own?" "Not at all," said Knave. "Whatever knowledge I gain will most assuredly be shared with you." Knave's reply garnered him stern looks from Arnaud and Vesteban. "Perhaps this is a conversation best had alone. Gentlemen, if you'd excuse us," said the king, holding his hand aloft, signaling the others in Knave's group to leave. The group rose to their feet, bowed, and turned to leave. But before they left, Knave heard Vesteban whisper, "Be cautious with what you share." Knave was confused as their reactions, as he had not been given any orders against discretion whatsoever before coming. Besides, any information he learned would be useless to King Rancor unless he had also had an Ovayan among his ranks. Then again, just knowing that Knave's presence alone could amplify the abilities of the neighboring army could be enough to warrant defensive or even preemptive offensive maneuvering by any that learned of it. Knave's mind was racing with the various outcomes. Why wouldn't Arshnad give me a full briefing of such matters? Was Arshnad just using me as a scapegoat for war, if it were to come to it? Is that what Arshnad wanted all along? Or was this something sort of a test? Knave broke out into a cold sweat and prayed he wasn't visibly unnerved. "Dear, you're scaring the poor boy," Queen Baba said, leaning towards her husband. "I'm sorry, lad," said the king, laughing. "I don't mean to put so much pressure on you, but it didn't seem like your group there would allow for candid conversation." "No," agreed Knave, "I suppose not." "But honestly, you can see the position King Arshnad has put me in." "Yes, I can," said Knave. "But really, we're just here in the hopes I can learn something about the Ovayan," he half lied. "Oh? Then why not send you to the west to learn from your own people there?" "Honestly," asked Knave. "Honestly," insisted the king. "I think he intends to use me as a means of defense against them should they ever return." Rancor furrowed his brow and leaned back for a moment, considering the answer. "You know all of the neighboring kingdoms have heard tell of you, the orphaned Ovayan, being raised by a rejuvenated king." "Orphaned by his very hand, sir," said Knave. "He told you that?" said Rancor, gripping his knees. "He did," said Knave. "And yet you still serve him." "I do." "Why?" "Because I know the hatred the world has for the Ovayan. I learned it firsthand by the very people of Arja," said Knave, pointing to his torn ear. "The histories tell of the enslavement of the Hathos and other races by the Ovayan. I have nothing but his kindness and other people's hatred of me to go on. So far, his protection seems to be the only thing allowing me any freedom among your kind." "You know there was once a time of peace amongst us. The Ovayan built much of this city, including this castle," said Rancor, motioning to the 2 large glass windows that framed the Mount Pius. "I assumed as much, just seeing the architecture of your city." "Oh, really?" said Rancor. "What else have you seen about such architecture?" In books back in Arja," lied Knave. "Anyways, what did you mean when you said Arshnad was rejuvenated?" "Well, years prior, your king had become quite ill. We heard tell that he was not long for this world back then." "Really?" "Yes. And now we hear somehow he yet lives and is healthier than ever. Not only that, but he's adopted a young Ovayan, who I now learn was orphaned by his very hands. An odd coincidence, no?" "I may be young, sir," said Knave, "but I know what you're trying to do. I've sworn fealty to my king, and I shall not waver. The Ovayan of old may have been enemies to Hathos, but I am not." Rancor sat back on his cushions, rubbing his chin. "I'm not quite sure what to make of you, young man," he said. "On the one hand, here sits before me a descendant of the god race. On the other hand, you act every bit as royal a knight I've ever known. Each is equally problematic, for you see, if your loyalty is as strong as you claim, then what's to prevent you from using the knowledge in the ancient chamber against me for the good of your kings, should he ask of you? Because I'm afraid to the Hathos. I'm a friend to the Hathos, said Knave firmly. I do not kill indiscriminately, and I very much doubt any Hathos could force my hand. So you would willingly face exile or death for insubordination to the orders that challenge your conscience? Knave remained silent and considered the question. You're still green, boy, said Rancor. Any soldier who's lived long enough will come to face objectionable orders, given time. But you're still young, and the world of war and politics is rife with innocent blood. Had I the choice, yours would be spared. Is that a threat? Asked Knave. My love, started Queen Baba, but Rancor held up a hand to silence her. The boy needs to hear this, said Rancor. Young Knave, I'm merely stating the reality of this world. If what I hear is true, then you're being raised as the king's champion. That is not a title given to an ambassador, it's given to an executioner. You are to follow your king's orders when all others fail him, and as such I cannot allow you to access the library. I forbid it. There's no telling what you'll learn or how it will influence the fate of my people. Then why waste our kingdom's time with this meeting? Why have us come all this way just to turn us away? Because if I wanted to see the Ovayan for myself being raised by a weapon. Knave was shocked at this statement, but somehow found the resolve to ask, And there's nothing I can do to change your mind? There is one thing, said Rancor. Leave the kingdom of Arja, and come live here instead. You need not swear fealty to any king. Simply leave as one of us, and truly live, be a free citizen, and a representative for your kind. Any protection Ashnod provided, I will give in spades. I wish to continue whatever relationship our ancestors once held. I want to unlock whatever mysteries the Ovayan left behind in this city. Uniting with you and opening that long-sealed chamber will be great addition not only to my legacy, but your own. Whatever shock Knave was feeling before was dwarfed by what he felt now. He had really just been offered his freedom in a city that his ancestors had helped to build, but reality set in faster than he expected. You know that would lead to war. You'd put your people in just as much danger having me here than if you just let me into the library, said Knave, rising to his feet. I would fight for you, Knave, said Rancor. Knave looked at the king in the eyes for the first time and found no dishonesty there. It's true, said Baba. We can help you. Why? Asked Knave. It's not right of you to offer me such a thing, knowing the lives that would be lost because of it. I'm thinking of the lives that will be lost if I don't, declared Rancor. You already know what you're capable of, or at least you're starting to. I can see it in your eyes. Why not take the path of peace and let the Hathos fight on their own? I didn't come here to start a war, Knave insisted. Maybe not today, said Rancor. But whatever knowledge you gain will be used against us in due time. If you can't see that, then you really are just a child. The unease in the room was palpable, as Knave was poised to leave there. There was so much of the world he didn't understand, and much he didn't want to. One thing you're trying not to say is that it'd be better if I just disappeared altogether, said Knave. If I stay and serve in Arja, people will die. If I leave here, or if I live, as you've offered, people will die. But if I were to just disappear... That isn't what we want, cried Baba. Knave smiled at her. I know I can tell your intentions are genuine. I need some time to think, though. I'm sorry Ashnod's put you in this position, said Rancor. But I have to admit, if we're to discover any band sneaking around our lands with a Hathos title and representation as you have, I'm afraid we would have done the exact same as Ashnod did to your parents. I understand, said Knave. Given the state my ancestors left Ovea, I'm afraid things will be difficult no matter where I go. And with that he left the throne room. The attendant from before was waiting to lead him to the guest quarters where his unit was. They all stood on edge as he entered a large circular waiting area outside of the rooms. At ease, Knave said, motioning for them all to sit and taking a seat himself, crossing his arms over his eyes. What did you tell him? Asked Vesteban. Apparently nothing he didn't already know, said Knave, but it doesn't matter. He won't allow us to access the library. Damn it, said Vesteban, striking his knee. Why? The same reason any other sane Hathos in this position would. The fact alone that I'm an Ovayan serving a rival kingdom is all the reason he needs. I hear we've gone about this all wrong, said Arnaud. We should have known the king wasn't just going to let us in, especially with Neb among our ranks. What should we have done instead? Asked Vestaban. Disguise ourselves as citizens and snuck into the library? I imagine our relations with Assinia would have fared well had they discovered the chamber and the library had been opened. At this point, all surrounding nations are aware of Knave, and he'd be the prime suspect. We'd be providing them all the fodder needed to accuse King Roshnod of inciting a war. Perhaps, but think of how much faster Knave and empower our troops with the dependencies after. They'd have to stand down in the face of our abilities. Knave motioned for Raz to follow him while the others continued their debate. They slipped into one of the rooms and shut the door behind them. What's the plan? Asked Raz. I think we need to consult Arshnod, said Knave. Right, let's just hop out the window and race back to Argia in the dead of night. Yeah, that's pretty much what I had in mind, said Knave. Oh yeah, we can do that now, can't we? Quite easily, said Knave, yes. Or we could sneak into the library like Vestaban suggested. And risk our unit being held captive if we get caught, said Knave. No way. I think I need to see Arshnod, and right away. Why, Knave? What's the rush? Knave stopped pacing to face Raz. Because King Rancor has offered to let me live here as a free citizen and access to the library if I do. And you think the king will just allow you to live in another kingdom? No, I want to know why he's never offered me freedom to live as I have seen fit in his own kingdom. Oh, Knave, said Raz, placing a hand on his shoulder. You know you're too valuable to just do as you please in Arja. Either someone will try to hunt you down for spite or trap you for trade to a foreign power. And you think I'm weak enough now to let them even try? Knave said fiercely. You tell me, said Raz, pointing to Knave's ear. Looks like you have a kind heart, and that will definitely be used against you. I'm just not cut out for this military life, said Knave, and if Rancor can truly allow me to live here in peace, then why wouldn't I take the chance? Knave, think about what you're saying. You know King Arshnod would come for you, and it wouldn't end well for the people here. True, but if Arshnod was to ever try to harm the innocent just to get me, then we'd see his true colors, and I would never willingly serve him again. So what do you suggest? Asked Raz. Just come with me tonight and consult Arshnod, and we'll brainstorm something together. He's a man of resources. I'm taking the path of least resistance. There's no reason this has to come to blood. Raz crossed his arms in a placating manner. Whatever you say, I'm with you. Great, said Knave, feeling more at ease. More one question, though. King Rancor said that to be king's champion is to be an executioner. Is that true? Well, if one were to boil down the job description to its most basic function, then you could say that. To serve as king's champion is to represent him in times of war, turmoil, and to prevent any dispute from those who would challenge the throne. This means at some point you will have to kill on his behalf. But I don't want to kill anybody. I just want to live a normal life. I know, Knave, I know, said Raz. But you leave that part up to me and my father. We've been brainstorming ways to help you since the day we met. It's not easy when you have a mythical being as a little brother, though. That's how you see me? Asked Knave. I always have. Knave felt great relief at hearing this. All too often the weight of the world felt as if it was on his shoulders alone. Knowing the knights from Liazia saw him as family meant everything to him. Right, well, I'll have to figure out my future, and I'm going to try and stop a war between two kingdoms tonight, he said, laughing in spite of his future unease. Let's at least eat with the men before we go so we don't raise suspicion, said Raz. Sounds like a good idea, said Knave. After they were treated to an unexpectedly lavish banquet, their group was offered a short evening excursion to the royal hot springs. Knave and Razia insisted that the party go on without them and that they were going to call it an early night. Vestaban scoffed it and insisted they were both being rude to their hosts, but Knave and Raz retired to their rooms anyways. They waited half an hour before meeting outside and casually walking into the city. Two cloaked figures walked at a distance behind them. Knave and Raz had predicted they'd be monitored, but continued onward as if totally unaware. Knave found himself daydreaming about a potential life there in Assinia, and he was captivated by the reflection of the city lights bouncing off the river. Knave, Raz said, nudging him. Let's go, yeah? Yeah, agreed Knave. They turned right on the next alley and were immediately cut off from view from the castle guard. In that moment, Knave gripped Raz's forearm and propelled them forward in a blur with the haste dependency. There was naught but a railing separating homes from the river, which they easily bound across, disappearing into the shadows of the night beyond. The cloaked guards ran and turned down the alley. When they reached the railing, they looked around to find nothing. Knave and Raz were halfway back to Argia when Knave slowed them down to a walk. Why'd we slow down? Asked Raz. Well, I want to try something, said Knave. See if you're able to maintain the haste dependency with just me present and not our unit. Why now? Asked Raz. Why not? Well, Mr. Ovain, you seem to be forgetting that not all of us can see as well as you in the dark. Come on, Knave pushed. We're on the main road now. Just stick right behind me for one mount shade to see, okay? All right, just don't get ahead of yourself and leave me too far behind. Not a chance, said Knave. Ready? I guess. Okay, go, said Knave, bursting forth. Raz shot out after him. To his surprise, he was keeping pace right along with Knave. But had it not been for the contrast of Knave's skin with the dark of night, Raz would have surely lost his way. Moments later, Knave lost Raz and slowed their pace. I knew it, said Knave. How do you feel? Parched, said Raz. I could use a tall glass of water. So the typical increased exhaustion is still present without physical contact. It would appear that way. Well, we'll keep testing this until we get the thing down. For now, go ahead and grab hold again, said Knave, holding out a forearm. Raz grabbed hold, and they quickly made their way back to Argia. He dropped Raz at the kitchens and showed him the private collection of midnight snacks before heading off. He made his way up the stairs and up to the grand hallway that split off before the throne room leading to Arshnad's chambers. There were 2 guards stationed a ways out from the bedroom doors, and they both looked surprised to see him. Sir? They said in unison, saluting him. At ease, replied Knave. Can you rouse the king? I need to speak with him. Yes, sir, they replied. The guard on the right turned and unlocked a panel in the wall that concealed a series of multicolored ropes. He reached for the blue one and pulled upon it twice. Soon after, the king came out dressed in silks and giant velvet cape. Knave heard giggling from within as the king shut the door behind him. Knave, my boy, what are you doing here? He asked as he approached. Well, I've run into a rather big snag in the mission, and I wanted to run a few things by you. But of course, shall we? He asked, walking forward. One of the guards moved to follow, but Arshnad held out a hand. You still have the king's treasures to guard. Don't let them go anywhere. I won't be long. Knave sighed and shook his head in embarrassment as they strolled down the hall. So, what's happened to bring you all the way back at this time of night? Asked Arshnad. It's King Rancor. He won't allow us access to the library, said Knave. Oh? That's not what this messenger replied with before. Yeah, well, it turns out he really just wanted to meet me. I see, said Arshnad. And what did he have to say to you? Well, Knave hesitated. Come on, out with it, said Arshnad. There's nothing you can say I haven't already heard of bring me to anger. Promise? Promise, Arshnad winked. Knave breathed deeply and exhaled. He said if you're just raising me as an executioner and offered me my freedom if I lived there in Assinia instead. The king nodded with a faux frown and said, a fine offer. I think you should take it. What? Oh, Knave, a little deception won't hurt anyone here. We're just trying to enter the library, not steal a crown. Just go along with it, play a part, and gain entry to that chamber. I have a feeling it should take a fair bit of time anyways. Why's that? Asked Knave. Because no one's done it before, have they? Asked Arshnad matter-of-factly. But what about after I've learned? What can I do from the chamber? Am I to return here and go back on his offer? The thing about true freedom, Knave, is that one can choose to come and go anywhere as you please. You'll just be putting his offer to the test. That is true, said Knave, rubbing his chin. But would I really end up living there after this? Suppose if you wanted to maintain the ruse, you could easily do so. By the way, how long did it take you to get back here this evening? Asked Arshnad as they rounded the corner into the dining hall. Raz was there, stuffing his face with meat pies and pastries. Is that from our secret stash? Asked Arshnad. What do you mean, our? Asked Knave. Raz looked at the two of them with a mouthful of fear. Move over, said Arshnad, reaching for a pastry. That's mine, said Knave, diving in as well. The 3 of them ate their fill and joked around late into the night until Arshnad reminded them that they had a mission to return to. Knave asked if he needed to escort back to his room, but Arshnad waved him off as if annoying. I just have one more question, said Knave, following him up the stairs and signaling Raz to stay behind. Fine. What is it? Asked Arshnad, continuing his ascent. Is my role as King's champion really as an executioner? The king stopped and turned to face him. Knave, the whole point of making an Ovaean champion is so that you won't have to. You have the abilities Hathos can only dream of. If there's a way to avoid bloodshed, I'm positive you'll be the one to discover it. Knave looked upward in hope, but the king turned his head aside toward the paintings that hung upon the wall. But I won't lie. Traditionally, the king's champion has been there to fight a king's wars for him. But together we can find a way to avoid war altogether. I believe that, don't you? Yes, Knave answered. Good, said Arshnad. Then settle for nothing less than a room with a view of the river in Assinia. Good luck, Knave. Thank you, said Knave. One last thing. Are you kidding me? Said Arshnad, now sounding bothered. Are you ever going to settle down and marry one of those girls? The king screwed up his face and shook his head. No, Knave, I don't think that lifestyle is for me, or for any of them, quite honestly. Besides, I already have an heir. And with that, he turned and didn't look back. Knave stood there pondering the statement before Raz snuck up behind him. Did he mean you? You weren't supposed to be listening. Well, it's only fair you ate my pastries. That ends. Let's see. Yeah, it's still going here. That ends chapter 7. And I want to see if I can get my messages up so I can just go over this. I'm definitely gonna have to re-record this chapter because it's massive. It's a it's a really long chapter, and there's so many different characters. Arnaud is supposed to be French, some have the Spanish accent, and the king, and then establishing what Rancor should sound like. And it's honestly, like I've told people before, like it's a blast. I think that everyone should read their own audiobooks, and um, the the young actor, not young anymore, but the actor from Dawson's Creek who just passed away, he he was saying not to take yourself so seriously. And that is like one of my biggest flaws of my life. And probably why I've never done an audiobook. Well, I've done it but it was so serious. One was it was more like self-help books. I almost don't want to talk about them because it's such a dark time in my life. But um yeah, James Vanderbeek was saying just have fun. Don't take it so seriously. And that's what I'm doing. And I hope any of this has been fun for you as well. And last but not least, I'm just gonna put there out there again about Ichiban Jobs, my dear friend and martial arts master instructor there in Japan. Ichiban Jobs, check it out. But also look forward to more Fragments of Divinity. I'm not stopping. I'm not stopping until this is done. And the final polished audiobook, it's definitely going to be worth the the money because you can see I'm putting the time in. I'm getting the characters, their inflection, their intention, um, and it takes work. And I hope that you can see that I'm putting that in. I hope you have. What even is today? That's what's bad. The days just blur. Have a wonderful Friday the 13th. Oh my goodness. Yeah, be safe out there. Watch out. No, just kidding. Yeah, if you can't laugh, you're crying. All right, take care, everybody.